Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop. Tonight, we're going to be talking to probably the smartest guy on the planet when it comes to innovation, especially technological innovation in government. And that guy, of course, is Aneesh Chopra. Aneesh today is the co-founder and the executive vice president of Hunch Analytics. But you probably know him far better from his time, whether it be on the Jon Stewart show, as the first chief technology officer of the United States government. And before that, he was the chief technology officer for the state of Virginia. So Aneesh, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Thank
Jeff,
you very much.
thank you for having me. Exciting opportunity.
Talking about the future, talking about technology is a fascinating thing. And you know, your book, well, tell us about your book a little bit.
Well, I spent maybe 3 years, 2.5 years with President Obama, and I was given this assignment early, which was to help usher in policies to make government more open and accessible. Yeah. And at the end of that journey, I was with the president in the Oval Office to say goodbye, and he was thanking me for my service. And he said, I want you to basically give me a memo to institutionalize a lot of these learnings so that there'll be a natural handoff, which we were doing anyway, but he provoked me to do a little bit more. And I realized that maybe there's a story to be told that hadn't been broadly disseminated out in the first term, but maybe could be understood better by folks to say, can Washington work again? Can we fix the big challenges of our day? And I thought, look, I'm confident this is going to be the decade of problem solving. And so why don't I talk a bit about the model I see moving forward? And that became a little memo to the president called the Open Innovators Toolkit, and then a book that tried to put in context that America has been an innovative country, an innovative state for many, 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 many years. We have a little bit of a gap now, but we're going to close that gap, and we're going to see the benefits of this over the next decade.
But our innovation in the past was industrial age innovation. And so there are certain ways that you do industrial age innovation. Yes. This is now the information age.
Yes.
So kind of how are they different, or what should we be doing, obviously, in the information age that is, actually, well, we don't know what we're doing yet, do we?
Well, I'll say this. We have 3 guiding stars, as I see it, that have the potential to help transform the way our public sector operates. The first draws from what we learned from Procter & Gamble, which is an industrial manufacturing story, but also an IT story, in the sense that the CEO made the claim that 50% of all new products and services would come from ideas outside of their famous lab system, that is their internal system. And they built processes in place and a culture that valued outside input. This spoke directly to President Obama's view that ideas should come from outside of Washington in to fix health, energy, and education. And from a technological standpoint, this basically means open up the kimono so you can invite those ideas in. And so there's an IT component. There's a very funny story I share in the book where I met with the Chief Technology Officer, Bruce Brown, at Procter & Gamble, and he said, you know, we opened up and welcomed Department of Energy research on how to deal with manufacturing where they wanted to avoid nuclear material being left on the factory floor when they were building nuclear weapons. They said they used very sophisticated modeling and simulation techniques to ensure that their manufacturing processes were operating at full speed. So they used new information technologies to improve manufacturing. By Procter & Gamble incorporating the Department of Energy model, they delivered over $1 billion of cash flow benefits in their diaper manufacturing production line that would not have happened if they didn't bring that government-initiated technology into Procter & Gamble. So step 1, a culture welcoming new ideas. Step 2, valuing frontline workers. Amazon.com famously empowers frontline customer service reps. There was a story I shared in the book where Jeff Bezos is sitting at the call center taking customer feedback as part of a rotation. Really? And he gets a phone call complaining about damaged furniture. Of course, yes ma'am, I will send you a new item right away. My pleasure, great to serve you, hangs up the phone. a worker, I don't remember the exact quote, but something to the effect of, "This happens all the time." To which Jeff supposedly turns around and initiates a conversation, and it turns out this customer service rep had fielded 4 of these very same complaints in the last several weeks. And he said, "Well, why didn't you share this information with anybody?" "Well, who am I going to share it with?" And so he creates the Toyota production system analogy in the information world.
Where you can stop the
it's called the andon cord. Right. In Toyota production, if the frontline worker feels like the thing's going to be damaged, they pull the cord and they stop production. Here, the equivalent digitally is that you remove the item from the online catalog. And you take it away from the catalog, it's like you can't sell it. So frontline workers had the authority to remove items from the catalog that they were deemed unsafe. And very empowering to the frontline worker, the supervisor couldn't put it back into the catalog unless they had vetted the complaint. So
just to pull that string a little bit,
yeah,
the Toyota thing was so revolutionary because it used to be that car, knowing that it had a flaw, would go
all the way through
the production line, and then at the end, they had a special team who would then fix those flaws.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Amazon was doing with the furniture. The customer service guys, in essence, would fix those flaws, as opposed to changing the systems, changing the structure, which the people who are part of that production line know best.
And it turned out literally a small change in the packaging was all that needed to be done to get that manufacturer's product to market safe. So this second principle was value frontline workers. And with a federal government civilian workforce of over 3 million, many of whom live in Fairfax County, it's for the first time asking the question, can we find a way to bring your ideas all the way up to the president or the cabinet secretary to be executed?
So the first one was taking outside ideas.
Having a culture of welcoming outside ideas. The second one is valuing internal input.
And
the third one's the most important in the information age, and it's the notion of platforms. And here, my inspiration was Facebook, believe it or not. Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer, and I were sitting on stage together at an event where she had done some homework. It was a jobs event, and at the time, Facebook had roughly 2,500 employees, maybe 3,000. And she had done a search, or had staff prepare, how many people hold the job title Facebook developer? And so she was about to present some findings to the public, and she sort of paused, and even I was wondering, and I'm curious, Jeff, if you took a wild guess, Facebook had, call it 3,000 employees, how many people in the country or the world hold the title Facebook developer?
I would say half of their.
Great suggestion, and you'd think that a technology-oriented company would value it. The answer was slightly different, 35,000. And you're going to look at me and say, the math doesn't compute.
Right.
3,000 employees, 35,000 developers. What happened was Facebook opened up a developer platform. They welcomed anybody. So Nike shoes, if they wanted to create a Facebook app, could hire a Facebook developer on the Nike payroll to help build a service that happens to work on Facebook. Now, what's interesting about this is that clever, because they're off balance sheet, meaning that wasn't Sheryl's paying for their salaries, but their brain power is being brought to bear. And we wondered, the 3 million civilian federal workers in a nation of 300 million people, 10-to-1 leverage. Imagine if 30 million Americans were building government apps, and I don't mean apps to be just sort of silly about photo sharing, but rather substantive improvements in technology. Maybe we could dramatically outperform what our expectations are for a more innovative state. And so you take these 3 principles about IT versus industrial, a culture of openness, a respect for frontline workers, and a concept of platform where people can build on top of information to get to that last mile, and you have the raw material for an innovative state. And what I will conclude my remarks by saying, it's a necessary step to have a government put these pieces in place, and thankfully I call this the handshakes and handoffs. There are already handshakes taking place in Washington where Republicans and Democrats have agreed to do some of these raw, basic ingredients, but we're not going to realize the vision of an innovative state unless we hand off to that 10-to-1 leverage that Sheryl Sandberg pointed out. We need the 30 million touching the 3 million workers in order to try new products and services that could help us deliver healthcare better, energy, and education. So that's the basic spirit.
Let me pull a couple of strings here that come to mind. Copyright rights.
Yes, sir.
You know, how do you do this without getting sued by some guy who says, now wait a minute, I sent you an email about that idea and you're now using it and I never got paid? Which anybody who's seen The Social Network kind of understands that that was a huge legal case up front. So how do you, in your open network, using platforms, everybody's throwing stuff into the bin? How do you retain rights to intellectual property?
Well, it starts with the premise that what the government publishes as the raw material is freely available without intellectual property constraint. The analogy, Jeff, would be weather. Today, the federal government funds the network of satellites and sensors to produce weather data. This is now freely available to anyone, for anyone to commercialize. There are now roughly $5 billion of private sector revenues flowing to companies who've built more proprietary services on top of weather data. They're not giving back their proprietary models back to the government. Although there is some information sharing, there is largely an extension of the government's open data, which is then commercialized. And we're on net better off for it. We have a growing number of giving back assets so that the pot grows for all, but there are those who commercialize and build their own proprietary assets, and all are welcome in an innovative state. In fact, I often joked, and my successor certainly joked, that the next billionaire who cuts $100 billion out of the healthcare budget, we will shake their hand to say thank you for saving the American healthcare system, and in turn saving the economy. One final note: the President did reform the America Invents Act, which was part of our strategy for American innovation. And there, we wanted to make it simpler for folks to assert intellectual property rights. This is, after all, the land of Jefferson. We are Virginians. Mr. Jefferson was our nation's first patent officer. And Mr. Jefferson strongly believed in a system that valued intellectual property rights. And so now we have a process to do more of this.
Okay. Can we put up the slide with a quote from President Obama about Aneesh? So this is the Inside Scoop. We're talking with Aneesh Chopra. We're talking about innovation in government. And in the second part of the show, we're going to get into more specific things about education, healthcare, and conservation. Back in a couple of minutes.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. Tonight we're getting the inside scoop from Aneesh Chopra, former Chief Technology Officer for the United States government, former Chief Technology Officer for Virginia, presently the co-founder and the Executive Vice President of Hunch Analytics, and the author of The Innovative State. Before our break, we promised people we would talk about some specifics. So talk about how government innovation can be different in ways that will help the average American working family.
I would say there are three things that I'm focused on that I think have impact for families. First, we want to create the jobs and industries of the future, which is to say our economy is dynamic, and part of what fuels growth in our economy is our commitment as a nation towards research and development and new ideas. Right. So step one, ensuring that we invent the jobs and industries of the future in the US. Step two is to retool our educational system so that it can ensure people are given the tools and the support that they need to learn the skills necessary to fill those jobs and industries of the future. And then third, along the way, we find ourselves often in struggle or in need of accessing government benefits. We want to make sure that we're getting the best use of those support services such that if we fall short or we need an extra hand to lift ourselves up, that we can avail ourselves and to take advantage of these services down the road. So a functioning and working workforce system. If you look at all three of these, let's just take one thread. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that there'll be 1.4 million new IT jobs, good, middle class, and above IT jobs by the year 2022. Under current projections, 8 years. Only 400,000 people will have gone through the educational pipeline between now and then to fill those jobs. So what will happen to those million jobs? Either they'll be outsourced to countries that will compete with us in the future, China and India, obviously, Eastern Europe, or we will double down on our nation's educational capacity so that we can get more folks prepared, or we're going to have to find ways to rethink how organizations and individuals obtain parts of the skills that they need to do parts of those jobs, and we're going to have to rethink work in our society. And I think that's a big policy debate that we're going to have for the next decade.
Yeah, the metaphor you used was actually an industrial age metaphor. You said getting through the pipeline.
Yes.
The education pipeline.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating because when you look at schools today, schools still look like factories. In fact, I worked in a factory once when I was a young man, and I was struck by the fact that the bell in that factory was exactly the same bell that was used in my school.
Yes.
And we use our schools to kind of train people to work in a factory, show up on time, follow directions. Here's the book, go through stage by stage. This kind of mass education approach. But for this information age, it's kind of going through the network, the education network, to fill these jobs of the future, and to be able to go through that network at various stages of your life. Not just when you're in your teens and 20s, but we're going to have to be retrained, re-educated for this new world at stages all through our lives.
You are preaching to the choir, Jeff, and so one of the things that I argue for in the book is that we need an innovation pipeline management process in health and energy and education markets. And the reason for that is we want to try new ideas on how to teach and what to teach, but we don't want to overhaul the entire system overnight because that's not how innovation truly thrives. What you want to have is a method by which you source new ideas from teachers. This is inside the school system, outside the school system, and within the capabilities of the school system. You want to be able to try new ideas, test them, validate that some of them work, and then you want to put capital to scale up the best of those ideas. Let me just tell you a personal anecdote as it relates to my own kids. My kids go to public school in Arlington. They take all these standardized tests, and there's plenty of debate whether they're good or they're bad or they have to be changed. But the fact of the matter is, the average Virginian child will take 1,000 test questions by the time they graduate. Good.
Of the standardized test, never mind is in the
Never mind the
coursework.
preparation for the test. Now here's the interesting question. How well are we incorporating that data to inform ways to better personalize after school or supplemental learning programs? Well, we ran an experiment with Arlington Public Schools. My principal, the superintendent, called me and said, would you volunteer on a project? This big data idea sounds important to me. Why don't we take a look at what we can do to further improve, in his case, dropout rates and the percentage of students who graduate with an advanced studies diploma? So where we are is to ask the following question. If I could pull as a parent all of my own child's answers at the question level, I know that each question maps to a concept framework that the Department of Education spent lots and lots of time standardizing across Virginia. Math equals the following understanding of fractions and proportions and the like. Then with all of this knowledge, I may not know what to do with it, but I might go to the Khan Academy website and say, hey, here's the collective knowledge of my child based on at least their response to these questions. And that might allow the Khan Academy, as an example, to personalize a playlist for my child that would allow them to pick up the pace on the areas where they're falling short and maybe not repeat the information that the areas where they already have mastery. And if we got into this culture where teachers and families can work together to use that information to better personalize after-school tutoring and support structures, and if you can't afford it, to have the school provision some of this work, we would have a far more personalized and I think effective learning environment. And you could see the same thing in adults. We just completed a project called Veterans Talent, where we mapped the unemployed veterans skills gap. We took a look at all the IT jobs in Virginia as an example, open job postings, and we found that about 28% of them are for entry-level work in IT, all of which could be filled by unemployed veterans in Virginia who don't have IT skills yet, but they are tech trainable based on their military backgrounds. So if I knew that information, what advice would I give a returning veteran to say, hey, with maybe 6 months of this specific skill training, you could land a job that brings you into the middle class and takes you further? Who's offering that advice? Where are the support systems that allow people to do this? No, instead, we have predatory lending and terrible school systems that milk the GI Bill for resources and underserve our veterans. That's not the great innovative state of America. We've got to do better, and I think these are the principles of which we do it.
In fact, there's a pie chart that we prepared for this show that really talks a bit about, we're throwing a lot of money in our society about education.
Yes, we are. In silos.
And that's just it. That's the problem. What appealed to me with what you were just saying, and having read The Innovative State, is if you could take the data from those standardized tests and post it, release it, not with any names to it, but just post it, and then ask people, what does this mean?
Yeah.
How can you move these numbers? What do you think we should be doing? And see what kind of answers you get, in essence, thrown over the transom, to use another old-time metaphor. That's really what you're talking about.
In fact, that's what we did in Arlington.
Okay.
What Arlington did was it prepared a data set of for 7 years, every answer, and whether or not that child was a dropout, or they graduated, and did they have an advanced diploma or not? Did they have behavioral issues? They married two data sets. Jeff, their expression in IT is, value creation occurs at the intersection of multiple disciplines, or in many cases, multiple data sets. So you take the state exam questions, which now is in the hands of Arlington at the question level. No other school district offers question level detail. You then marry it up with what the schools know locally. They put the package together, and with a few privacy-protected research partners, we had a big data competition, offered a $10,000 prize, and we had a dozen teams from all over the country compete on mining that data for insights. And we just announced the winners maybe a month and a half ago. And what we learned was that there's a lot more we can learn in understanding what the data means. You could, for example, say, show me all the questions dropouts get wrong. And are there common themes that we might use to maybe intervene earlier that might be helpful to address the issue. So there's a lot of opportunity to take action on data and insights that we didn't normally know to even look for because we didn't have the raw material on which to ask those questions.
You know, you're talking about the value being at the intersection. When you think about our cars,
yeah,
you know, the value of my car is not just the engine, it's not just the climate control, it's not just the GPS, it's not just the tires. I mean, it's the entire package put together. That's the value of that automobile. That's what you're paying for when you buy a car.
And now they're adding connectivity as part of that value proposition, so the road can communicate more effectively with the street or the highway to be smarter about difficult trends and traffic flows and the like.
One of the things, we've got about 2.5 minutes before the next break, but one of the things that really appeals to me with what you're talking about is taking government data and releasing that to Americans to then exploit in what, and GPS data.
Yeah.
You know, government releases GPS data that it collects, and all these different industries have now run up everything from ATM machines to GPS in your car.
You got it.
So that could be a huge economic boom for this area.
And I would argue that you're starting to see capital starting to flow in this direction. One of the opportunities, people are concerned, Governor McAuliffe rightly points out that sequestration has put us in a position where we may never know what the new normal looks like because it feels a little bit less than it should be in terms of our tech economy. And so the question then becomes, where's the next round of growth? And to me, wouldn't it be phenomenal if Virginia invented the methods by which every child could learn the skills they need to compete for a good middle-class job? Not only would we be the beneficiaries of our own tools, but we'd create the companies that would export those solutions around the US and potentially around the world. We would have billionaires in Virginia who became billionaires because they got every child the skills they needed to compete, or every grandmother the healthcare treatments they needed to stay healthy, or to have that energy system double its rate of productivity so that we relied less on these dirty sources of energy. And we have the capacity to modernize the smart grid, to improve on health IT, to create learning technologies. We've just got to put the brain power of this region against these problems. And if we do that effectively, we'll both be the leading commonwealth, the leading state in the country to solve them, and export these to create jobs.
All right. We've got about, 30 seconds till the break. So when we come back from this break, we're going to talk a little bit more about how this applies to conservation. We're going to talk a little bit more about healthcare. And then we're going to be talking about a fabulous study that you did back when you were working for President Obama. So I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother.
My son.
My sister-in-law.
Were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America. Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm Jeff Barnett, and again, we're talking to the smartest guy on the planet when it comes to innovation, technology in the government sector, Aneesh Chopra, who is the Executive Vice President and co-founder of Hunch Analytics and former CTO for both the U.S. government, the Chief Technology Officer for the U.S. government, and for the state of Virginia. One of the problems, Nate here was just talking about the downside of releasing government information, of protecting it. One of the things that, as we make government more efficient in using data, manipulating data about people.
Yes.
We run a whole series of risks. I was in Israel recently, and in Israel, they have traffic cameras that can digitally recognize license plates. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to find out where a certain person was, they can tell you very quickly. And they do that for anti-terror operations. That has been prototyped here in America, and it was stopped almost before it even got started.
Yes.
Because of Big Brother. So, give us some ideas. How do you think about this balance between government being this coordinator of information and this reaper and sower of information? Now I'm back in the agrarian age.
Yeah.
And Big Brother.
Yeah. Well, I think this points to something that I worked on in the first term, which was the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights on the internet.
Okay.
And it's not law, but the president did call for it. And I'll say this, as more and more of our daily lives are trafficked, communicated, stored, shared on the internet, whether it be our personal data, like photos of the family, or sensitive transactional data, our IRS filings, our healthcare claims data with Medicare, we have to understand that these new technologies hold both promise and peril. So a lot of what I tried to do was to say, are there rules of the road that would increase the confidence the American people have in the use of their data? And there are three basic principles. Number one, we have to move away from these long, what they called informed consent. Sign here, don't worry, just sign here and you're great. I think the biggest joke is if you bought the new iPhone, you get the iTunes agreement and it says, click here to agree to these terms. Well, who reads all that detail? Right. So you don't really know your rights. I think we got to move away from that notice and consent model towards one where you have control over the use. Think of it as a settings panel where you acknowledge that this information is going to be used in the manner with which the person who's requested it of you has said, and only for the purpose that they've said. And if they want to use it for some other purpose, then they need to actually seek your permission. This idea of a control panel on your data is, I hope, a bipartisan and thoughtful approach that allows us to put more of the data into the use in the context of the internet, but have greater confidence that it's being used only in the manner with which it's been asked.
Let me just understand.
That's the central thesis.
So you would have to agree for it to be your own data to be used for certain specific.
Yes.
Not in terms of general, not in general terms, but it's okay to use it for marketing to grocery stores.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily okay to use it for marketing for anything.
Correct. You want people. What you want to know is that if I'm going to provide for you my data, knowingly or unknowingly, I need to be able to know what it is that you have on me. So the three principles are: one, give me control; two, allow me to download a copy of my own data and edit it in case it's wrong, credit reports; and three, I want the authority and freedom to share my data with whomever I want. Now, this gives me more control over my digital assets. And in the private sector sense, you want to be able to avoid that bait and switch. You'd want to say, hey, I'm willing to give you my photos and my sensitive data, And if you wanted to use it to basically sell advertising to me, that's a trade I'll make. But then don't go giving my data to, you know, Association XYZ for purposes of identifying me with bias or not on maybe a decision to buy a home or provide me credit terms, because that's not what I signed up for. I don't want the fact that there's a picture of my kids acting foolishly on the internet and somehow that's going to affect their ability to get auto insurance.
Right, or so, for you to have auto insurance.
Or me. And so you want that right to be clear that I have if I'm providing data on your service, you're going to tell me exactly how you intend to use it. And if you want to change that agreement, you have to inform me that I can opt in or opt out of. That framework feels like a safer one to open up more and more of the internet for these sensitive transactions.
It would seem to me that what we're talking about is managing risk.
Yes.
Because there's risk in automobiles.
Yes.
But we don't say we need to get rid of, we need to have zero risk in automobiles,
right.
So we need to get rid of them. We're going to have risk in our data.
Yes.
So who and how do we manage risk? Some people would say you have the market manage the risk. And if people are cavalier with your data, then we just won't use them anymore. That probably doesn't work. Having individuals manage the risk has also been problematic for the reasons that you just said. So, government.
Yes.
Does government have a role
yes.
in managing risk?
We say that, and the way we manage risk is through regulation, Jeff.
Right.
So, President called for a baseline privacy protection for all Americans called the Fair Information Practices Standards, and to make that widely available. And those were these principles that I'd outlined, that if you want to use my data, you have to inform me of its use and give me a control panel to adjust, allow me to opt out or opt in. So this idea of a baseline privacy protection in commercial data does not exist today. And there are Republicans who have been expressing support for this idea, and of course Democrats have been expressing support for this idea. So it has the makings of a bipartisan agreement, hopefully over the next 2 years, to establish that baseline principle. Now there's a separate conversation, which is in the wake of Edward Snowden and the whole role of government, Big Brother aspect, which is, should the government itself be a lot more clear as to what it intends to do with the data? And there I do believe there are ways to improve the NSA's operating practices that would both allow us to keep a sharp eye on terrorist activity, but without violating the privacy of the American people. And the president did have a committee that took a look at this and said some very specific things about how one can balance both objectives without it feeling like you've taken away rights, or on the other hand, reduced our ability or capacity to deal with terrorist threats. We've got to move that forward.
So in that sense, that panel, that charge is really within the kind of the intelligence community.
Yes.
Within the financial world, it's probably with the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Probably. So we've kind of maybe decentralized it, and maybe that's how it should be done. But oftentimes in government, we kind of stick the rose on somebody's nose and says, you know, if we have an issue with the protection of personal information in this country.
Well, we have one nose in that area.
Who's that?
The Federal Trade Commission. But more in the spirit of they have explicit authority around protecting children on the internet. They do have a regulatory function there, but they also have a function around don't mislead me. So if you're an online service and you purport to offer a place to store your photos, and then you use the data to bias against me on purchasing insurance, then you're misleading me if you didn't inform me that that's an intended use of my own data, and therefore they can bring you up on essentially misleading your customer.
And how are they doing? Are they doing that job?
They're using the tools that they have as effectively as they can. What we're calling for is this additional baseline privacy protection, which would affirmatively assert that you have to give patients or users the right to control their own data, and that baseline is missing. So what you have is, here's the stovepipe of Washington. Healthcare data is regulated by the Office of Department of Health and Human Services. And so if there's a data breach, if there's been some inappropriate use of your protected data, there's a Department of Civil Rights in the Office of Health and Human Services that can prosecute and has already extracted multi-million-dollar fines from people who've been caught misusing health data. In the case of energy, the Department of Energy has been working collaboratively with the states to say that you're violating my privacy if you disclose my energy usage habits. And then in the Department of Education, there's a law called FERPA, which allows you to also protect your student records. So we have silos, Jeff, and we accept that with subject matter expertise, but this baseline privacy protection for our regular lives, the photos and the like, that does not exist, and that needs to.
Okay, Aneesh, you mentioned healthcare.
Yes,
so let's
sir.
kind of, you've talked around it a lot. The innovative state and healthcare.gov.
Yes.
Those seems to be on two different planets.
Yes.
Or am I just going for a cheap joke?
You're a mixture of both. Let's acknowledge that we're going to have many more failures than successes as we turn what is an $80 billion IT ship from traditional models that perhaps are not designed for success.
And $80 billion is what the federal government
spends on IT.
And state government and all that is...
Double it.
Wow.
Double it. So the challenge is that we've got to move the way our government uses technology, procures technology. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. It's broken. Here's an example of how broken, Jeff, and everyone in this community knows. The contracting vehicle that Medicare used to build the exchanges was a 2007 contract. The law wasn't even conceived in 2007, let alone signed. It was signed in 2010. How do you turn to a 2007 list of contractors to see who's good enough to handle the 2010 law? You would think that they'd want to put out a request for proposals off of the law. Here's what we have to build, who can do this well, and let's sign them up. Unfortunately, the culture of procurement is such that they couldn't actually do that and get the job done in a timely manner. But here's the good news. Look how well it was recovered. When other states collapsed and they couldn't get their healthcare.govs working, they basically were out of commission for the entire cycle. Here, a relatively small group of people were able to swarm in and resurrect from the ashes this site that got to work. Now, what that tells you, Jeff, is we have great capacity in this country to build great things, and it doesn't take, Superman. It takes a smarter approach to project management and a mechanism to get that talent to work.
I'm going to bring you back to that. And talent to work, I like it when we come back from this break, and we'll be gone for about 2 minutes, but I want to talk about how managers, how do managers manage in this innovative state?
Yes.
Because they're
very differently.
Well, yes. And how do they learn that difference is another great point. Back in 2 minutes.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm Jeff Barnett talking with Aneesh Chopra. Before we broke, we promised that we were going to talk about this whole aspect of innovation from a manager's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of managers are stuck by having to manage contracts. They have to manage teleworkers. Their budgets are under scrutiny all the time. And now we're saying that you got to be more innovative, and you've got to kind of distribute information faster to people, and you've got to take guidance or suggestion in from a wider variety of people. I mean, how do you retrain managers, re-educate managers to do that?
So let's begin with what I hope was good news, and that is both from my time in Virginia and my time in Washington, the one theme that came out loud and clear was when I met with agency mid-level staff and manager level, what I found was a passion for the mission of the organization and a frustration that because Washington appears to be broken, these folks might be working 4 or 5 years to get a bill reauthorized with some modernization approaches, but that for whatever reason the Hill just doesn't operate. Or we just saw the workforce bill get signed this year. It was like 12 years late. Right. And so you have this frustration that I went to the Kennedy School, that the muscles on management we learned when we went to the proverbial gym and trained on them were all about how do you achieve consensus, work with the Hill, get the budgeting process aligned, calculate return on investment, benefit the society against the cost. Those are important muscles, and we've all been trained on them. The one aspect of this is the good, which is it's a chance to achieve your mission objective, that which you felt like you've been put on this earth to do, with a new muscle in the gym that hadn't been worked out much, but a muscle that doesn't have as much controversy and could yield better results faster. So it's a good idea to do this because it's going to help you get to where you want to go. The bad news is we haven't been trained on it. So, and that's partly why I was motivated to write the book, and partly why I'm hopeful that George Mason and NOVA and other local institutions in Virginia can beef up the training capacity to give folks the idea that, number one, this is in the art of the possible. You can do this. You don't have to be a PhD in physics to understand that there's ways to open up the data and allow others to help you build whatever it is that you're looking for. But you also need air cover. Jeff, a lot of what I tried to do with the president was to say, this is what your role is. You are now to do this. If you've got a data set, if it's FOIable, you should just put it on data.gov. And if you want to find creative approaches to problem solving, post a challenge on challenge.gov. And if you think that there may be a clever public-private partnership model, reach out to stakeholders to say, what would it take to get you to build tools that would make better use of this to help us achieve our mission objectives? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau offers a phenomenal case study because it was a startup agency.
Right.
Technically, it was born out of a lot of these other elements, but I shared the story where Elizabeth Warren and I, now Senator Warren, sat in the White House mess a few weeks after she was named by the president as an advisor to launch this bureau that she conceived of.
Because she couldn't be named as the chair.
Well, that's politics. But I asked her, I said, at the time, I said, Elizabeth, would you like to be leading the last agency of the 20th century or the first agency in the 21st? And the premise was, of course, you know what she wanted, use the management techniques to solve these problems long before the politics could wear you down. And my favorite story about that is this, the first assignment they had in the law, the Dodd-Frank law, was to create a mortgage form that was simple and more consumer friendly so people couldn't get duped into signing up for bad mortgages, that which got us into the financial crisis. Well, because the Republicans are playing games with the director, the regulation wasn't allowed to be in place until the director had been confirmed. So you'd think that the agency would have been, woe is me, I can't get anything done. Instead, they launch a website, Know Before You Owe. And they invited the American people to help us write the new disclosure form. 30,000 Americans over the 6-month period that they ran this process contributed their ideas and input, so much so that President Obama could stand in Falls Church, Virginia in the spring of 2012 holding up the draft form built by the American people. I don't believe that draft form had even gone through rulemaking officially yet. And yet the president was able to stand up and say, this was built by us, the American people, to help us avoid a future financial catastrophe. So did those managers have to go back to school? Were they frustrated? Was it annoying? Was it something that was a burden to them? Quite the opposite. It was liberating that they could do this. They wanted to do it thoughtfully, so they brought in staff to build the site and make sure it could get input. They did it the right way. They got expert opinion about how to do it. It wasn't very expensive, and they could put it to work right away. And the results speak for themselves. And my answer is, we all have the capacity to be innovative. We've just got to, use the air cover, ensure that we have the support systems underneath to allow us to do this, and then just follow our heart and passion for what we want to see accomplished for our agencies and our mission, and those things will all work themselves out.
You mentioned challenge.gov. So I've not heard about that. So tell us about challenge.gov.
Well, the idea was, going back to the 1700s, thousands of soldiers, naval soldiers, were killed in London, in the UK, on account of their inability to determine longitude. And no physicist at the time, or no person in London, could develop tools to determine longitude. So frustrated by this, they asked Sir Isaac Newton, and he couldn't do it. What do you do there? They said, okay, we're going to offer up what is now a $3 million prize. It was 20,000 pounds, $3 million prize. And a regular Joe named Harrison, who was a watchmaker, said, I have an idea in what resulted to be a chronometer. And his idea was the best idea that ultimately solved the problem. And the premise, Jeff, is that in our country of 300 million Americans, we have talent in every corner. We have a Harrison in every corner who can rise to the occasion and bring their expertise to bear on a problem that needs solving. The question is, how do you do it? Well, you need a platform, a place where folks can go to pose challenges, and a place where folks can go to solve them. And we didn't have congressional authority, so a bipartisan act of Congress in 2010, the reauthorization of the America Competes Act, gave every federal agency up to $50 million authorization to issue challenges and prizes. And then the American people could respond.
And that was a bipartisan initiative?
Bipartisan initiative, and Newt Gingrich has been a big fan of challenges, as well as obviously many on the progressive side. And what you find is that now hundreds of challenges have been posed. Lots of creative solutions have come forward. A tattoo artist in Las Vegas came up with an idea to double the rate of oil spill cleanup in the wake of the BP oil spill. And that concept, that we have talent like this in every corner of the country, is just ready to be tapped. And it's somewhat disconcerting for folks who want all of this to flow through government contracts. Prizes and challenges, you don't have to have a PhD in procurement physics either. So anyone can compete without any muss or fuss. And so it opens up competition, but it pays for results. And now the Challenge.gov platform, thankfully, was awarded a Kennedy School Innovation Award. It was the award winner, I believe, in the last year or so. And I hope many more agencies will take advantage of the tool to bring the best ideas forward from the American people.
The whole government procurement process.
Broken.
And there are people who are invested in keeping it broken.
Understood.
Because we have like CGI Federal, who did the healthcare.gov site. Their expertise is not in healthcare. Their expertise is in winning government contracts.
Yeah.
And we have a whole slew of companies who are great at winning contracts, and then they'll figure out, then they'll hire the people to actually do the work, whether it be sanitation or building airplanes. Doesn't really make any difference. Boeing is probably going to build on it.
Yeah, to their defense, that's the rules of the road as the game is currently played. And here's an interesting point about CGI. I don't want to defend them too much because obviously there's a lot of blame to go around. But I will say this. When the team came in to recover healthcare.gov, they still relied upon those CGI developers, and they got the job done. So the same people with perhaps better or different leadership or with a clear mandate on what they had to accomplish was able to dissolve the mess and focus the mind. And so they had the engineering talent to build the site. It just was that maybe the methodology was off and they needed someone to be able to declare what needed to get done. But ultimately, the site that worked was because those folks combined with these external experts worked together as a team to solve it.
Right.
And so, I don't mean, acknowledging that we have a whole culture of contracting, which feels a little bit like you're an expert at winning the contract, not in delivering the service. And that doesn't feel good for the taxpayers.
Because part of delivering the service is getting the methodology right, getting the mandate right,
yes,
getting the leadership right. It's not just hiring the software code writers, who I'm sure were fine people.
Yes.
But that whole
structure,
that structure was filled by people who are good at winning contracts.
Well, as the rules change, and the president's put forward a whole, basically, myth-busting approach that says we can reduce a lot of the regulatory complexity without changing the law. In fact, one of the ways they did is they developed a technology-focused federal acquisition regulation so that you could procure more in the spirit of these agile software development techniques. This is getting a little bit in the technical jargon, but a lot of what we want is where people have to produce results in weeks.
Right.
It's not this one big bang moment. Here's a check, come back in 5 years with a working, amazing product and flip the switch and aha, here it is. Instead, it's let's build iteratively so that every few weeks, every month we pull up, we see what works, accept what works, move on, build from what doesn't. And so that methodology of build and iterate, people felt was impossible to execute against with the rules that we had. And President's new technology, FAR, busts that myth. You can.
We only have about a minute left. There's a strategy for American innovation, a website you can go to. Just Google it, and you'll see a marvelous document that Aneesh worked on. It was first drafted in 2009. It's, I think it was updated in 2013. Take a look at it and you'll see not only what the building blocks are at the bottom, but really what they're actually focusing on at the top. And that very much narrows down. Boy, I wanted to ask you, 30 seconds, what are you doing next? What's next on your life?
I am absolutely committed to Virginia. The governor put me on the Council on Virginia's Future, and so I'm hoping to bring these ideas forward in Virginia, and also to make sure that these new products and services have life. And so I'm building new products and services through Hunch Analytics. So we're going to commercialize a lot of these ideas as well as advance the policy agenda going forward.
I wasn't kidding when I said you're the smartest guy on the planet when it comes to government innovation. Aneesh Chopra,
thanks for having me,
very
Jeff.
much. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
And thank you for joining us here on the